Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Historical. I'm really glad you guys keep coming back and listening. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the compliments. And, I just like to talk about things that I like to talk about until anybody wants to come on and co host and have their own conversations. Doors always open to anybody. Feel free to message me at any time. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, of course, and TikTok. But, or you can comment here on one of the episodes. But today, false confessions. Why do people confess to crimes they didn't commit? It's frustrating to see, isn't it? When you're watching a documentary or reading about one, or you just ask, like, how is that possible? Why can anybody do that? So I dug into it a while back because, if you've been following me for any amount of time or know me in person, you know that I have to know about things. I can't just let things go. Yeah, I need to know reasons. So with that being said, I won't waste any more time here. This episode is called Why Innocent People Confess. And I want to set the stage here. Imagine you're sitting in a small room, right? There's nothing dramatic about it. Just a table, a couple of chairs, maybe a camera over there in the corner. The door's closed, and across from you are sitting two investigators. And they're calm, they're professional, and they're patient. And they're telling you something you know isn't true. They're saying the evidence proves you did it. They're saying they have witnesses that place you there. They're saying they already know what happened. And all they need now is for you to admit it. And at first, it feels simple. You just tell them the truth because you know you didn't do anything. This should be over pretty quick, right? But it doesn't end. They ask the same question again and again and again. And after a while, something starts to shift. You've been sitting there for hours now. Same room, same chair, same questions. And slowly, something strange begins to happen in your mind. You start wondering if maybe you're forgetting something. Maybe you were there. Maybe you did something you don't remember. Maybe everyone else knows something that you don't. And sometimes people confess, even when they're innocent. I saw someone online sum this up once in one sentence. They said, interrogations aren't about discovering the truth. They're about getting someone to say something that closes the case. And we're going to revisit that later on, because that stuck with me. Because the more you look into this, the more you realize this is not rare. It happens far more than people would think. So the question is, how? How does it happen? From the outside, this is one of those things that just doesn't make sense. You see someone confess to a crime they didn't commit, and your immediate reaction is, how could anyone do that? Why wouldn't you just keep saying no? I don't understand. Or they would say, I would never do that. No chance. Not me. I'm too smart. Most people land on that same conclusion every time. But when you actually start looking at these cases, you realize something very uncomfortable. You realize this is not about intelligence. It's not about people being stupid. It's about what happens to the human mind under pressure. Because that room we just stepped into, it changes people. And it doesn't do it all at once. It happens slowly, step by step. So instead of just talking about what happens, let's stay in that room. Let's walk through it together. And at this point, you've been sitting there for quite a while, maybe an hour or two, maybe longer. But you're still confident. You know that you didn't do anything. You're answering their questions clearly, and you're explaining your side. But the people across from you aren't reacting the way you expected. They're not asking if you did it anymore. They're talking like they already know you did. We already have the evidence, they say. We just need your side of the story. And that's where the first shift happens. The conversation stops being about whether you're innocent, and it starts becoming about why won't you admit it? And now more time passes. Maybe 3 hours, maybe 6 hours. You're still in that same room, in that same chair, answering the same questions, and there's no reset. There is no break from it at all. And something important starts to happen. You see, at the beginning, your goal was simple. Tell the truth, clear things up, no big deal. But now your goal starts to change. Now you just want it to stop. You just want to get the hell out of that room. You want the pressure off of you, and you want the questions to end. And once your goal shifts from being right to just wanting to be done, everything about how you respond starts to change. And while that's happening, something else is going on in your mind. You start replaying everything in your head over and over. Every detail, every moment. And you're trying to understand, why are they so sure sitting across the table? And when they start introducing details and suggesting timelines and offering explanations, your brain starts what it naturally does. Your brain starts to try to make sense of things. You start thinking, wait, could I be wrong? Did I forget something? Damn, maybe I was there. Was I just there and I don't remember it? And that, my friends, that's the moment things begin to break down. Because now you're not just defending yourself anymore. Now you're questioning yourself. And here's the part that really matters. Doubt does not just show up out of anywhere. It just doesn't show up. Doubt gets built slowly. Because think about what's happening. You've been sitting there for hours. You're exhausted. You are mentally drained. The same questions over and over and over. And the people across from you are completely certain. They're not unsure. They're not questioning themselves. They're certain. They're telling you they have evidence. They're telling you your memory is wrong. And they're telling you that they already know what happened. And the human brain doesn't handle that kind of conflict well. On one side, you have your own memory. I know I didn't do this. And on the other side, you have a confident authority figure. They're telling me I did. And they seem completely sure of it. So your brain tries to resolve that conflict. And the easiest way to resolve it is doubt. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I did forget something. Maybe they know something that I don't know. And once that thought gets in, even just a little bit, everything changes and you start losing. Because now you're not holding on to certainty anymore. Now you're negotiating with doubt. And under pressure, doubt can grow. Now take everything we just talked about and imagine being 14 years old. Because this is where it becomes even more serious. Teenagers are still developing the parts of the brain responsible for decision making, long-term thinking, handling pressure, amongst other things. And kids are wired to trust authority. I don't know about so much today, but back in my day, they were teachers, parents, police. We were, taught to trust them. So when someone across from them says, "We already know what happened, kid," that doesn't feel like a suggestion. It feels like a fact. And that makes everything harder. And we've seen exactly how this plays out. Take the case of the Central Park Five. Don't know if you've heard of them. Maybe you have. 5 teenagers, some of them as young as 14, were brought into interrogation rooms after a brutal attack. They were questioned for hours, some even throughout the entire night. Eventually, several of them gave statements that sounded like confessions. But when those statements were compared later to each other, of course they didn't match. And why would they? They had different timelines, different details, different versions of what happened. And none of it matched any of the physical evidence. And years later, DNA proved the truth. They had nothing to do with the crime. But by then, those confessions had already shaped everything. And there's another specific case, a 14-year-old boy named Michael Crow. He was in the same kind of room with the same kind of pressure. At first, he denies everything, but the questions keep going hour after hour. Investigators suggest maybe he blacked out, maybe he doesn't remember. Eventually, he starts guessing at certain facts, trying to give them something that fits, trying to please them. And eventually, he confesses. But he didn't do it. He was being questioned over the murder of his own sister. Now go back to that room one more time, just one more time. Because at this point, something else changes. The pressure shifts. At first, everything felt overwhelming, very heavy, very serious. But now the tone softens. They start saying things like, "Hey, maybe it was an accident. Maybe you didn't mean to do it. Maybe you just lost control." And suddenly, right then, confessions don't sound like admitting something terrible anymore. It sounds like explaining something human. And under enough pressure, that shift matters. And this is where psychologists started noticing something. False confessions are not random. They all follow patterns. If you know me, we talk about patterns here all the time, in every case, in every history event, everything, patterns. Sometimes people confess just to escape the situation. Sometimes they're pushed into it by pressure, and sometimes they begin to believe it. That's the part that really gets people when doubt replaces certainty. And you can actually hear this happening. During the questioning of Brandon Dassey, how to make a murderer, investigators said, "We know something happened to her head. What else happened to her head?" Now, that's not really quite a question, is it? That's a direction. And that's how suggestion slowly becomes memory. And once a confession happens, well, everything changes. Because in court, a confession is one of the most powerful pieces of evidence that there is. Jurors will hear it and think, well, they said they did it, case closed. Even when the details don't match, even when the evidence doesn't line up, that confession will stick. And the entire case builds around it. If you remember in the beginning, I read the quote of the man about closing cases. So when the entire case builds around the confession, this is where everything we've talked about comes together. Because most people don't understand what's happening in that room. They think if they just explain themselves clearly enough, everything will work out. But, my friends, interrogations aren't built to work that way. You see, investigators have a job, just like you and I have jobs. Their job is to build cases and close cases. That doesn't make them bad people, but it does mean you have to protect yourself. And honestly, the advice here is simple. Whether you did what they're accusing you of, or whether you didn't do it at all, ask for a lawyer. Just ask for an attorney. That's it. Because they tell you something right at the beginning. Everything you say can and will be used against you. Listen to that. They don't say it will help you. They don't say it will clear things up. They don't say they're here to help you. They say it will be used against you. And as I always say, words matter. Because words matter. They're telling you exactly what this situation is. So believe them. And this is not about being anti-police, not at all. It's about protecting yourself. Because their job is to build cases and close cases. That's it. And sometimes, all it takes is someone else sitting in another room saying, yeah, I saw Jonathan do it. And just like that, everything shifts. Now you're the focus. Now you are under the microscope. So protect yourself. Ask for an attorney. It's simple. It's your right. It's your American right to do. And they'll say things like, hey, this makes you look guilty or whatever else. Don't fall in that trap, my friends. And again, this has nothing to do with guilt or innocence. Only has to do with protecting yourself. Because once you confess, we know that's the end of it. The system will do everything in its power to keep you guilty. The system doesn't want to ever admit it's wrong, that they made a mistake. They can't. Because if they did, the entire system falls. And maybe, maybe the most uncomfortable truth in all of this is that none of us really know how we would react in that room until we're the ones sitting in that chair. I know I didn't. My name is Jonathan. I'm the creator of Historical Media, and I tell history stories that refuse to be forgotten.